Got it.
And we are live again.
Good
Hey, Anne,
day.
how are you?
I'm doing all right. Good day, everybody in internet land.
Yep, always good to see the people that come and join us for the chat and also the ones that drop in afterwards. That's always fun to see.
Yeah, I'm always pleasantly surprised that we have a few comments here or there and people who
Yeah.
want to contribute something to the conversation. So keep it up. Add more.
Speaking of conversation,
Do tell. What's our topic?
well,
What's our topic?
our topic is the voices in our head. Now, I came up with the idea of this, but you very cleverly came up with the actual topic name, which was fantastic because I couldn't make it succinct, which is probably representative of what voices were going on in my head. I will come back to that, however. What triggered this thought for me about bringing this idea or this topic for today was initially last week. I had a client come to me and say, Chris, I know I'm getting in my own way of making a decision, but it keeps quietly whispering at me that I should be doing something different, and it scares me if I make that decision because of all of the consequences of that decision. But she said, it's driving me nuts because it just keeps tapping me on the shoulder, and I know I need to pay attention to it.
Mm.
And so we had a look at what that was, and after a little bit of soul searching, let's call it, decisions started to be made, and this lovely domino effect of continuing decisions happened. And so that on its own is quite a normal conversation that I have with clients and move them through that. However, then about 4 days later, I had another client ask me this very succinct question. So they said, Chris, I have loud voices in my head and I have whispers in my head. Which one am I supposed to pay attention to?
And what's the answer?
Well, I suppose there's many answers, but my answer is actually both. And one of the reasons that is that the loud voice still needs to be paid attention to, but it might be paid attention to in a way that goes, okay, I hear you, you can stop now. And now what is the whisper? What's really underneath that that's trying to be communicated? So looking at both is still required. We can't just ignore the loud voice because that might actually be sitting there to make us pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that was actually on Tuesday this week. And then for me, Wednesday, I woke up and I was feeling really anxious. And in fact, I was so anxious that it affected my capacity to be properly motivated during the day. Mm. And I did find going to the gym helped because it helped me breathe through it and just do stuff. So it allowed me to put one step in front of the other. And it was a really interesting reminder for me about how much anxiety can creep up and take over my head space and start to impact things in an invisible way. Mm. And I was like, oh, isn't this interesting? I've had these voices, these questions around voices in my head. Am I supposed to pay attention? And here I was now experiencing, I'm going to call it overwhelming anxiety because it does tend to take me over. And I didn't even know what the voices were. I didn't know where the anxiety had come from. I analysed what had happened the day before, what I might be worried about. There was nothing that was very significant to really create it. And then moving forward, it turned into from anxiety into paranoia. And when it turned to paranoia, I kind of went, oh, now I can hear some of those thoughts that are going on. And do they really serve me? And I went, oh, this is a theme. is obviously there's something, obviously probably a big message for me about paying attention to what I'm really thinking about.
Yep.
And then I thought, well, that's got to be relatable. Surely we've all got these examples going on. And so I thought it would be good to bring almost three different versions of the same thing.
Well, I think it's important that we recognize that we do have voices in our head, right? And even identifying. So yeah, I just want to go back. I want to go back to the louder quiet, because I used to have this feeling like the loud one was the one that was like the one that's kind of like berating and kind of putting yourself down and, oh, you're an idiot, like that kind of droning, beating over your head kind of a thought. And then I also thought at the time, like, the quiet one was the one that you got to pay attention to. The quiet one, that's the one you got to pay attention to. But over time, I've identified that you have all of these voices in your heads, and they come from different places. I mean, the things that you learn from childhood with your parents, or trying to protect yourself from feeling any kind of pain or discomfort because of something you experienced as a kid, things like that. But what I'm focused on now is not necessarily the voice and what it's saying, but more so, how do I feel when I hear the voice? So do I feel good about what is being said right now? Because then I know that's the thing I need to follow. If I feel bad, just if I could do it cut and dry, bad and good, it's the bad voice that I want to quiet, and I want to pay attention to the one that feels good. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish, because you can be maybe excited and nervous about doing something. So it's kind of like an anticipation, right? And those are the ones that I try to pay the most attention to, because it's things that scare me that I say, yes, I want to try that. But then I'm like, oh crap, what am I saying yes to? Do I really want to put myself out there? So it's trying to identify what feels best, and then just kind of picking it apart a little bit deeper. Yes, I'm excited about it, but sure, I'm nervous. Okay, so I need to ignore the fearful side of that and embrace the excited side of that.
Yeah, because we all know that when we get anxious or nervous about something, it's exactly the same physiological thing that's going on. Right. So we can choose which way we're going to interpret it: exciting or apprehensive.
Right.
So yeah, choosing which emotion we're going to hone in on is really good. And that's, in the first example, that one seemed to happen really quickly and easily, with that first client who wanted to make a decision but couldn't quite make it. And essentially she was halving her number of clients she was going to work with, which felt quite damaging, until she's realized that what's happened is that it's given her more space and time to create more of what she wants to actually do. Which, it's lovely to see her blossoming again rather than being bogged down by the commitment. And this is the thing, isn't it? We, when she came to me and said, oh, the decision, all she could hear or was communicating, it wasn't all she could hear, but it was what she was communicating the most, was, this is going to have a devastating effect. People are going to feel like I'm letting them down, or like you said, that berating type of feel. And couldn't quite find where the goodness was in that. And by bringing that forward, we started to see some of the benefits of potentially making that decision. And for me, that listening to both, sometimes there's a really loud voice that says, just don't do that. Not a berating voice, but just like, just don't go there. Don't have that conversation with that person. And sometimes we forget, because we're so used to, like you said, the louder voice being the berating or the negative or the, we need to push it aside. And so then we default to push that aside and we go and do that conversation anyway. And then we go, oh, no, I was being told really loudly not to do that conversation. And yet we did it anyway. And it has this ickiness to it.
Yeah.
And so that's why often I respond really simply is you've got to listen to both and find out what both voices are saying. The volume actually doesn't matter.
So there's a saying that a friend of mine uses all the time, and she says, thoughts are like a bad neighborhood, never go there alone. So,
I like that. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah. So it's part of it is getting those thoughts or voices or what the voices are saying out of your head and hearing them sometimes for the first time. Like it's because it's like churning in here, but having a conversation with you, getting them out, or even hearing somebody parrot back the same words, like, or just reframing the same words back at somebody going, well, maybe I don't really believe or feel that. It's just, that's what's going on in my head right now.
Those are the pieces of words that create a sentence in my head. Yes, rather than actually being a real thing. And this is what happened when I found I was in anxiety, is that I went into logical mode and I could feel the anxiety and it wasn't letting me sleep and it wasn't letting me be motivated. And it was doing all sorts of things, all that feeling. And I had to move that. I sort of had to pick all of that up and move it to the side and go, right, logic. Let's get some logic going on. And spoke it out with my husband. It's like, okay, what do I really have to be worried about? Oh, there's these really minor things, but even those things aren't significant enough to create this. And by the time I articulated that, it really did move into a softer paranoia. I say paranoia is softer because for me, the paranoia is softer for me than anxiety. So when it goes into paranoia, I can almost switch it off. I can go, oh, I'm just being paranoid about something. Really? Why am I caring that this person might care? What am I, what? Stop that. And so I can kind of talk myself out of paranoia. And so when it lessened down to paranoia within a matter of hours, it really was as a result of talking it out.
Yeah. Getting
the ridiculousness out of my head and making it a little bit more logical or finding some logic to it. So it really did, it sped up the process.
Yeah.
Instead of sitting in anxiety.
And I think that's the point of the thoughts are like a bad neighborhood. It's giving a space for those words to have some air, some space to be seen, to be heard, and then to hear somebody else, like have a conversation with somebody about it so that you can kind of debunk some of those things that are in there. Because some of those are so deeply seated in us. Like if we just went to the example of what is somebody going to think about me or whatever, like those are usually some stuff from your childhood or your parents or their beliefs or whatever the case may be.
So I will so claim that totally. That for me, that's what it is. It's all that childhood stuff. Yep.
Yeah. So giving it voice, and sometimes you'll even hear when you're saying it, you're like, oh my God, I can hear my mom's voice, or I can hear my dad's voice, or that's the way they used to say it even, you're like, oh, I'm becoming that person. But you're not becoming that person. It's because you've been given this kind of set of voices or thoughts to kind of sit on your, your committee upstairs, and you've got to give them a place to expose them so that you can see them for what they are,
and possibly change them.
And then choose the ones that you want to use moving forward. Like, yeah, that one doesn't serve me anymore. I think I want to go in this direction instead.
And so for me, it's interesting that you say you shared about getting to whether the feeling is good or bad. I don't know. We were being general about the good and the bad.
Super general with
yeah.
It's your compass. Yeah. I use it as my compass, right? So is this feel like the right place to go or the right direction to go? Yes.
Yeah. And then there's, for me, I actually then have to remove, because I find that I get caught up in the emotion So I can decide. See, this is where it gets a bit trickier for me, because when I'm in anxiety and I decide something feels good, it may not actually be serving me.
Mm.
So I have to actually, like I said before, pick up those emotions and move them aside, really clear away the murky emotion, and get some really black and white things going on. So I don't look at it from a, does it feel good or bad? Just, is this actually making any sense? Because when I get in anxiety, it really is it's so emotionally driven. And so that's something that I just thought was a really interesting. There's some different ways we can tackle it, isn't it? Like, it's not, and we've got to be careful where we apply adding an emotion or removing emotion, and when is that, it seems to be effective in many ways.
I think you have to acknowledge whatever it was, whether it's the thoughts or the feelings, and is it keeping me stuck? Is the anxiety paralyzing me right now, or the thoughts paralyzing me now? And thoughts and feelings, they're very interconnected, right? You have a thought, you have a associated feeling with that, and then you have an associated action or inaction that comes from that. So you can be in that kind of spiral, and it doesn't take long to get in it. And before long, you're so far down it, you don't even
know when you go into it. No. Right.
But the first step is noticing that you're there. So yes, I'm anxious. Okay, I need to pull myself back, have a conversation with somebody, go for a workout, do something that's going to take me away from the current energy that I'm in, so that I can find a new way out of where I'm at, because this current place that I'm in isn't serving me right now. And I feel like I'm just continuing to spiral. So it's a way to shift.
Yeah, and I find I don't tend to pay attention to my anxiety. I don't notice the bottom of that spiral or getting down into that spiral until I have nothing else going on. So distractions of the world around me keeps me oblivious to the fact that I've even gone there. Mm. Because I'll prioritize other people, or I'll show up for this, or I said I'd be at this appointment or whatever. And I'm distracted. And then usually for me, it's the quiet time, which is usually when I'm heading off to sleep, or when I'm needing to meditate in the morning and I just can't go there because I'm having to be quiet and inward, and then it gets really messy. And so it's so important to come back to making sure you have that quiet space to even recognize it in the beginning. Otherwise, when do we notice that we're in the spiral in the first place?
And I think more people than not are in that place that you're talking about, where they don't even know they're in it. They're distracted by so many things in their life. The kids got to get to school, this has to get done, the dinner, the cars in the shop, whatever the thing is that you think you need to do, keeps you from doing the inward looking inward work, right? To see, where am I at? How do I feel? Am I in an okay place? Am I not in an okay place? Right? To do some of that analysis and to kind of break out of that cycle. But I think a lot of us are very unconscious in that way.
Yes, and that's what I was. That's why I liked when you suggested the actual. I knew I'd suggested the kind of theme of it, but when you picked the title, it was like, yes, those voices in our head. Do we even recognize that they were going on? Are we so distracted with life that do we even hear them?
So every time I've heard somebody say something like this, they're like, if you're listening to this right now and you're saying, what the hell are you talking about? That's the voice. That's the voice going on inside your head. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. Blah, 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 blah. That's the voice.
It is, isn't it? Because that's the, oh, I just don't want to pay attention. Let me distract you with something else.
I'm just living my life. What are you don't, grr. That's the voice. Or, yeah, I get what they're saying. Yeah. I completely, yeah, I do that all the time. That's the voice inside your inside. And there's honestly, I talked with some colleagues about this, and we talked about it as being like the committee. You've got the cheerleader, you've got the moral support person, you've got the, oh, you can do it, and you've got the old kind of parents,
Pessimist that might be sitting there
hey,
going, can you
yeah,
really?
yeah, like there's a whole committee. They're all sitting at the boardroom table, right? And none of them are. I mean, they all have a purpose. Some of them are there to try to make you feel better. Some of them are there to try to save you from feeling pain or hurt or any kind of whatever. And some are there to pump you up and try to get you off your ass and to do something. It's knowing when to tap into them. What are they telling me? What can I learn from that? Where did I learn this stuff? And what's going to serve me now?
Yeah, so where do I put my attention? You know, like where do I put the attention? Like which voice do I pay attention to? Which was essentially the question from the second client. Which voice do I pay attention to? Which is why I come back to both. And like you're saying, all of them, because it's not just a loud and a quiet one. There's ones in between as well.
I mean, I've had the experience, and recently, where I had the voice that was like, you need to pick up that book. And maybe it's not even a voice. It's kind of like you have a sprig of inspiration. It's like, yeah, I've got to go back and read that book. There's something about that book I need to pick up and read, and then go do it. And following the ones that feel kind of inspired. I've also had very loud voices that I have paid attention to too. And I'll tell this story quickly, but there was a few years back, I was really, really feeling bad about myself and the business. And I'm like, maybe I just have to go get a job. Maybe I have to go. So I started looking online, and I applied for one of the first things I could get or could see. I'm like, it's mindless. I'm sure I can get it. Well, anyways, I got called almost immediately, and they were essentially interviewing me over the phone, like a pre-interview to set me up for the real interview. And my head was yelling so loud, what are you doing? Hang up the phone. What are you justifying? And while that's screaming, like, you are not going to take this job. This is the dumbest thing not dumbest, but like this is not going to serve you, and yelling. And I'm giving trying to have my thoughtful answer. I have never had a more split personality moment in my life. Like, yeah, I think that would be great. Yes, I'll take a look at my calendar and we'll find something. And what are you doing? You don't even want this. This is the worst idea in the world. That was some crazy stuff. However, I could appreciate how loud it was, because whatever you want to call it, my inner knowing, my soul, whatever, was saying that is not the path. Please do not go that direction. If you do it, fine, great, but it's not going to serve you.
Yeah. And pulling apart I think it does come down to what serves you right now. And the other element that I found with the conversation I had with my client around which voice to listen to, the loud or the quiet, it was really obvious that there was so many, not just, well, I suppose they're a bit of the committee thoughts, but it's also all these outside expectations that we're constantly bombarded with, and which one of those we need to pay attention to. And maybe they're just part of the committee that's sitting inside our head. Yet the way she presented it was a lot of the outside. I've got to make sure my kid well looked after, and I've got to get, like, it's those outside
what that sounds like to me is it's almost like somebody's, because all of that is filtered through you and your experience. So if you have a committee member that is worried about what people think of you, it's going to speak out, like it's going to resonate with that voice, and
And
it's
it's
going
going
to,
to create those circumstances, and they're the only circumstances you can see.
right.
Yep. Yep. So they're the ones you communicate about. Yep. So it is still part of the committee. But it was just this really fascinating mindset that one or the other was needed to be listened to rather than all. That was the thing that actually got me about that question with her, was this whole idea that you pay attention to only one.
And I think that's how I was originally kind of introduced to the voice in the head, is the inner critic and the inner voice. And then you've got, so just boiling it down to two. And I know you like to say, but there's black and there's white, and there's a whole lot of gray or color and then filled in the middle or whatever, right? Like, so it's not just loud and quiet. It's there's way more to it. And if you're in danger, you don't think that voice is going to be like kicking in pretty loud as well, saying get out of dodge? Like, you're, it's not going to be hello.
Oh, maybe you should.
I think maybe you should, get out of the car or something. No, tap 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 tap. I don't think it's going to be like that.
No. No, it's probably going to be a hard no. Like
Get
it's
down.
going to be really loud. Yeah, yeah, yep. And so for me, the greatest learning out of this last week is interesting that I didn't pay too much attention to the first conversation until 3 days later. I had a similar conversation and went, oh, well, this is starting to build, but I didn't recognize it yet. Even though I'm good at awareness and I'm good at all those things, I practice it daily, I still didn't realize that it was leading up to me. It was actually a message for me to pay attention to what I had going on, because I'd been distracted. It had been a pretty full week this week. So I had been distracted with all of the obligations. And so getting to that point where really a lovely reminder to make sure I pay attention to the other to the conversations I'm being asked to have, because they have a message for what is going on for me.
Yeah, and if I could build on that, I think thematically that's how our learning happens. So you were given a lesson, didn't quite hear it. Given a lesson, didn't quite hear it. Ooh, I picked up something here. And then why is this becoming a theme? Like, why is it? Why is this and this and this? Oh, now I see the through line and how this all connects. And sometimes I think that voice or that indication will get a little bit louder, a little bit louder, a little bit louder, just like um, um, with injuries in the body and stuff like that. Like, oh, I kind of tweaked that thing, and then it doesn't feel quite great, and then it gets a little
Oh,
sore,
it's sort of, yeah. Should I make that appointment to actually get it looked at? Yeah.
and then it becomes really bad, and then you're like, I'm forced to look at it. So I think it's kind of a similar thing, and
Yes.
you have to be open to the learning to be able to process it and learn the lesson. And I think it's all kind of incremental, and that the theme supports us in the learning. In But when you take that
Yes.
time to kind of put it all together.
Yes. And then I'm really grateful that I conveniently had this Facebook conversation set up already, to then, voice it even more with even more clarity and clarification. Um, and it feels like now, so because it's Friday morning here for me, when hubby left this morning, I went, oh, my head's actually clear today. So I'm thinking that the anxiety and the paranoia that for whatever reason kicked in, I've actually heard it now. And
Well,
so, but I was still aware of checking in with what my brain was doing this morning.
So what do you think gave you a little bit more clarity? 'Cause are you saying you got some more through the conversation?
So one of the other things that happened this week is I disrupted my routine a little. We instigated a few new things into our home routine. And so last night I actually I combined a bit of the old routine with the new routine rather than just going, right, this is just the new way of doing it. Going, this is how we've always done it. Oh, we're starting this new routine. Great. That's great. I actually think that was more about what put me into anxiety. And so last night I actually combined the two. I allowed a little bit of a mesh of the old routine and the new routine. And I fell asleep much easier. And I woke up this morning with a lot more ease. And any of the little changes that then happened again today, they were much easier to handle because I didn't feel like I had been shoved too far. So it was about me coming back a little bit, paying attention to what actually I still need from that old routine, and just being a little more gentle with myself in the movement.
Yeah, the thought that came to mind is that it softened the transition.
Yeah. So that is what I think allowed me to move into a clear headspace this morning.
Awesome.
Ah.
My head feels quieter. I didn't think I had a lot of voices in there, but maybe there was a little bit of, when you go to a bar and it's just so loud that you can barely hear anything. So it just becomes like a ah. I think maybe that's what was in my head. I think it was just there's just so much going on upstairs, like literally like getting it ready to go on a trip, that there's just so much noise. I couldn't think. So even just taking this time to listen to you and what's going on in your story, like it quieted the the bar that's in my head.
That's in your head, that all the extra noise that's going on. Yeah. Good. Awesome. Well, let's hope that settles even more for you as you go on your holiday. But also, it's been really great for me to be able to just articulate this a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, and for me as well, because it's always great to hear somebody else's perspective on topics that you've kind of run through on your own or run through with other people and developed over time, but then to hear their version of it. Oh yeah, maybe you take into consideration this too. And it just adds another layer of confirmation and clarity and perspective that I think is important.
Completely. Thank you, Ian, as always, for having this space. It's so good. I definitely needed it this week.
Awesome. So we'll be back, hopefully in another 2 weeks.
Yes.
All right.
I'll be there.
Awesome. We'll see you then. Bye.
See you then.